Ahoy there, ChrisFish here, and today I'm going to show you how to repair your trim tabs on your boat. The trim tabs are at the stern here. Let me show you. So this is a trim tab. This is the port side trim tab, and what it does is it allows you to put your bow down. It also allows you to trim side to side so that you could balance your boat better and cruise more efficiently. So that's the port trim tab. And if we come over here, here is the starboard trim tab, and take a look at this. That's why we have to repair it. So the pin fell out or disintegrated, whatever it is, corroded, and we need to make a repair so that we could get this boat back in the water. Now I spoke to the manufacturer. They said I have to replace the whole thing. They don't make a pin that goes in here. That was like $300, $350. So I'd have to replace this, and I don't want to unscrew this from the hull. This is factory, and also it's just not necessary. Everything works perfect except the pin came out. So instead of spending $300, we're gonna spend $20. And instead of unscrewing all these factory screws, we're not gonna do that, and we're gonna install our own hinge rod. What I did already is I measured that diameter. That is 1/4 inch diameter, and I ordered a stainless steel rod right here. They come in 6-foot rods. This is 3/16 stainless steel. It's special stainless steel for marine environments. It helps with corrosion better than other stainless steel. And then here are all the tools that you're gonna need. This is gonna be very simple, all common hand tools. So let's get started. All right, so first we want to check to make sure our 1/4 inch rod fits in the base plate, and it does. Now let's test the trim tab, and that doesn't fit, so we need to widen this hole. So to make this wider, I'm using a large flathead screwdriver and prying the hole open. Now this is actually a lot stronger than I thought, and we're gonna need more leverage. So the end of the screwdriver has a hole in it, and if you stick another screwdriver in that hole, you could get a ton of leverage when you turn it. And this seems to be working. All right, so now let's see if our rod fits in the hole. Awesome, this is definitely a tight fit, but it works. And perfect, it goes all the way through the second hole as well. Now the next 2 holes on the tab have an old rusted rod stuck in it. So we're gonna use a hammer and the new rod to tap out that old rusted rod. Beautiful, and now we can make sure the rod fits in that last hole, and it does. Okay, so now that we know the rod will go all the way through the trim tab, let's remove it. And there's still a piece of rusted rod in here, so let's knock it out. And this looks like it's ready to go as well. So let's get the trim tab lined up with the base plate like so. And now we want to measure the rod against the whole trim tab so we know where we need to cut it. And I'm just going to use a piece of tape to mark it off. Now we can put it in a vise or something to hold it and make sure it's nice and tight. And you can use something like a simple hacksaw, which will cut right through this metal rod, no problem. Just make sure you stay on that line and try to go as straight as possible. Perfect, and this is exactly the length we need. And before we install this, you can see those sharp burrs at the end of the rod where we sawed the metal. You definitely don't want that, so take a file and smooth it out. It's important to remove these sharp burrs just like that. Good, and with that all smooth, now we're ready to install this. So get the trim tab and backing plate lined up, and before we hammer it in, double check the length of the rod to make sure it fits. And that looks good, so let's hammer it in. Actually, before we do that, I'm just gonna put a little tape down here, so if the hammer slips or hits the hole a little bit, it won't damage it. And now we could drive it in. When doing this, make sure it's going in nice and smooth, just like that, and try your best not to hit your boat. Once it's almost there, grab a punch, and that's gonna help you drive it in the rest of the way. And I don't know what it is, but there's something super satisfying about driving this rod in. Okay, coming to the end here, and we want to drive it in so it's just about flush like that. All right, and that is in there good. And originally I was gonna use epoxy on the ends, just the 2 ends, but this is so tight in there that we don't need any epoxy. This is not coming out. So let's remove that tape. And the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just crimp this end down onto that metal rod. So grab a long pliers and squeeze the heck out of it. Okay, and that's going nowhere. If you want, you could crimp this down, but we really hammered it in here tight, so I'm not gonna touch it. It's not gonna budge. And then at the end, we crimped that down, so this isn't moving. That's perfect. So that's that trim tab done. Let's go test it out. Okay, so let's push the trim tab all the way down. Good. And then let's bring it all the way back up. Beautiful, that worked perfect. Our starboard side trim tab is completely fixed. Now let's go to the port side trim tab and let's replace the rod as preventative maintenance so we don't have the same issue. And good thing we're replacing this because I don't know if this would last another season. So just like the other trim tab, we need to open up this hole just a little bit. And for this side, I'm gonna use the screwdriver as a wedge and hammer it in to spread that hole open. And this method is actually working pretty good. It's opening that hole up just enough. Now let's see if the rod fits. Perfect. And I think what we could do here is hammer the new rod all the way through, and as we do that, it should push out the old rusted rod. This is working great, and look at how corroded this old rod is. It's not even a complete rod anymore, it's just a shell, and it's super corroded. I'm fairly confident they didn't use 316 stainless. It almost looks like they used a coated iron rod or something cheap like that. All I know is I'm glad we're fixing it the right way and using the proper stainless steel rod. And it seems that we can't drive it any further, so I'm gonna try something a little bit different here and use these locking pliers to clamp down onto the rod. Then use a hammer and hit your pliers to force the rest of the rod out. And this is working flawlessly. Good. Now that's the last of the old metal rod removed. Alright, so now we want to make sure the rod goes all the way through the base plate smooth and freely. Just like that. Now for this part of the trim tab, at the end here I don't expect it to go through. It's still crimped, and we're going to force it into that. But it should go smoothly into these. So let's push it through. And perfect. You can see it gets wedged into the last one, and that's exactly what we want, so we're good to go here. Now we can measure the rod against the trim tab and mark it off where we need to cut it, and just like before, cut it right at that mark to get the perfect length. And again, make sure you file those sharp burrs off so it's nice and smooth, and there we go. Now let's finish up this job and install it. So align the trim tab and the base plate, and just like before, hammer that rod in. It's important you're hitting the rod straight on so you don't bend it, and try not to hit the hull as you hammer it. Beautiful. And hit it all the way in until it's just about flush at the end. And last but not least, grab a pliers and crimp down the end to lock that rod in. Alright, so with that rod in there, the end crimped down so that rod won't go anywhere. This is free to move. We're about to do a dry run to make sure it's moving up and down without binding up. And then if that's good, we'll go get the boat in the water and do a sea trial. So let's send the trim tab down, and it's going down nice and smooth. And then let's send the trim tab back up. Alright, and this side is fixed as well. So now you guys know I just can't put it back in the water looking like this, so to protect it from corrosion, let's add a layer of primer, and then let's add a nice gloss black base coat. And these trim tabs look great, so we'll let it dry for a couple of days, and then the boat goes back in the water. Alright, so the marina has my boat on the travel lift, and she's going back in the water today. It's always such a good day when the boat goes back in the water. I can't even begin to explain. Okay, so she's pretty much in the water. Let's get on here without falling in. Good, and now we can head out and put these trim tabs to the test. Okay, so right now the boat is on plane and the trim tabs are retracted all the way so they're not pushing on the water at all. So let's press the all down button and you can see both trim tabs are pushing down into the high speed water under the boat, which forces the bow down. So right now the bow is plowing through the water. So let's press the all up button and retract the trim tabs so there's no drag at all and they're fully retracted. And this is working perfectly. So now let's test trimming or leveling the boat from side to side by pushing the bow down button on the port side, and I'm maxing this out as an extreme example. You can see the boat is listing severely to the port side, so the starboard trim tab is working perfectly, and we can bring this back up so the boat gets level. Good. And now let's test the other trim tab by pressing the bow down on the starboard side. Now normally you would just put the trim tab down a little bit to level the boat out, but again I'm maxing these out to really test these trim tabs to make sure our repair is good. So this is an extreme example. When you normally use the trim tabs, the goal is to just make minor adjustments to keep the boat level. So if you have extra weight on one side, you could balance it out, or maybe the wind's blowing on one side and you could level the boat out so it doesn't list. And there you go, that's how you repair your trim tabs to save a ton of money. We did both of them, they work perfectly fine, the boat is great now, and that's all there is to it. Hopefully the video was helpful. If it was, remember to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more DIY and repair videos like this on boats, consider hitting that subscribe button. And as always, all the tools and products I used in this video are linked down in the description for you.